Good day, everyone. My name is Anjali Arzate from Section 1. Today, let us discuss about the learning-oriented assessment of grammatical ability. But before that, let me first read to you the objectives. At the end of this lesson, students will be able to understand the purpose and importance of a learning-oriented assessment of grammatical ability. Second is to explore the various methods of data collection and analysis for assessing grammar. And lastly is to identify the advantages and limitations of different learning-oriented assessment tools and techniques. So what is learning-oriented assessment of grammatical ability, or the LOA of grammar ability? It is an assessment that are designed to measure a student's ability to learn and use grammar in a meaningful way, rather than simply testing their knowledge of grammar rules in isolation. So, it means that it is to measure a student's understanding and ability to use grammar effectively in writing or neither speaking, rather than simply testing their knowledge of isolated rules. This type of assessment is more likely to reflect a student's true ability to communicate effectively and use grammar correctly in context. So, in short, learning-oriented assessments of grammar focused on how well students can actually use English grammar, not just on memory of grammar rules. These assessments are designed to test how they use it in real-life situations. So this approach attempts to provide teach and learners with a summative or formative information on the test taker's grammatical ability. So we have here the summative information from assessments. So summative information from assessments help students track their progress, give teachers a way to give helpful comments, determine grades, and encourage students to keep learning. Summative information from assessment refers to the results or data that are collected at the end of the period or instruction. So this information is used to evaluate the overall achievement or the performance of the students. And at a single moment or over time, teachers reward and motivate students' learning. Example of summative information assessment: final exam, end of unit test, essay, writing assessments, standardized tests, and performance assessments. So the results of this assessment provide snapshots of a student's knowledge and skills and used to compare students' performances across different contexts or to set performance measurements. Next, we have the formative information from assessments. So, formative assessment, it provides teachers and learners with concrete information, with clear information about what aspects of grammar they have mastered and what aspects have not. It also encourages students to reflect on and take responsibility for their own learning, so they can continue to improve even without direct teacher involvement. So, formative information from assessment refer to ongoing feedback and data that are collected throughout the learning process. So, unlike the summative assessment, which it is used to evaluate students' performance at the end of the period of instruction or unit of study, while the formative assessment is used to monitor student learning and provide ongoing feedback that can be used to adjust instruction and support students' progress. Learning-oriented approach to grammar assessment addresses the following questions. So these are the questions. First, we have the how do I know if my students have learned and internalized the grammar points covered in the course? So how do I know if my students can use these grammar points to communicate spontaneously in real life situations? How do I know if the test tasks make it essential for my students to use the target grammar points? How can I use grammar assessment results to provide feedback for guiding learning? How will the results from this grammar test provide information to me on what to reteach? How can I design interesting and cognitively engaging grammar tasks so my students will enjoy learning grammar? So, how can I design interesting and cognitively engaging grammar? So, how do I engage grammar tasks engagingly for students? So that my students will enjoy learning grammar. So in this scenario, I will describe how classroom-based grammar assessment can be designed to promote a grammar learning and inform instruction. And I will firstly define learning-oriented assessment of grammar and contrast it with other forms of classroom assessment. I will then argue that they must to implement learning-oriented approach to grammar assessment. Teachers need to design the assessment taking into account consideration from both grammar testing theory and second language learning theory, and then I will illustrate how a learning-oriented assessment of grammar can be applied to a simple achievement test of grammar. We have here the methods of assessments. We first have the alternative assessment. Alternative assessment is to emphasize an alternative to and rejection of selected response, timed and one-shot approaches to assessment, whether they occur in large-scale or classroom assessment contexts. So alternative assessment use different methods than standard tests to measure learning, like projects, reports, and such. While the authentic assessment focuses on real life situations and tasks, helping a student learn for the future. And the last one is the performance assessment. It is to evaluate students' skills by observing them doing something like a presentations, demonstrations, such. So learning is defined here as the accumulation of knowledge and the ability to use this knowledge for some purpose. The learning of grammar is seen as the process of collection knowledge and being able to use that knowledge in real life situations. To make clear that the purpose of evaluating grammar in the classroom is to help people learn, the term learning-oriented assessment of grammar will be used. So in terms of methods, in order to successfully evaluate a student's ability to process and produce grammatical input and output, the method used in a learning-oriented assessment of grammar should be flexible and open to different types of tasks. Because the ultimate goal is to not only gather performance data on a student's ability to use grammar, but also provide information on how they process and use grammar in different situations. A learning-oriented assessment is designed to be an integral part of instruction, integrated into the teaching process, happening informally and formally throughout the learning journey. So teachers can gather information on their students' grammar skills at different points or continuously analyzing it to help them teach better. In sum, a learning-oriented approach to grammar assessment raises critical issues for classroom teachers when it comes to decisions for constructing assessments designed to fulfill a learning mandate. One set of decision relates to test construction, especially as this pertains to test design and issues of purpose, construct definition, task selection, and method of scoring. So teachers must grapple with issues related to what exactly should be assessed within the learning process. So what kind of assessment should be pressure at different learning structures, and how assessment results should be presented to learners to promote further development, and of course how learners can collaborate with their teachers and peers with their own learning and assessment. Next, we have the implementing learning-oriented assessment of grammar. So, learning-oriented assessment, or the LOA, is a process-focused approach to assessment that integrates teaching, learning, and evaluation. It emphasizes using assessment as a tool to enhance learning rather than simply measuring achievements. So this approach is to evaluate that integrates teaching, learning, and assessments all together. It focuses on using assessment as a tool to help students learn and improve rather than just testing their knowledge. With feedback, reflection, and active involvement, students can consistently enhance their understanding and skills. So in learning oriented assessment of grammar, there is a concern about the extent to which non-grammatical factor such as personal characteristics like the shyness and their affective schemata, nervousness. It may affect students' performance on the assessments. So the key is that here is to clearly define the construct being measured, the grammatical knowledge, and minimizing the potential impact of these non-grammatical factors on the assessment results. A third consideration for classroom-based learning-oriented assessment is the need to measure the students' explicit as well as their implicit. So in a learning-oriented assessment of grammar, we need to look at what students know, which are the explicit, and also what they have absorbed and can use automatically, the implicit. Think of it like this. If you gave them time to plan or use multiple choice questions, you can see how much they've learned in a clear, straightforward way. But to really understand how well they've mastered the grammar, you need to look at how they use it when they are not planning or thinking about it too much. So next, we have the implication of operationalization. The operationalization stage of classroom-based learning-oriented assessment is also similar to that large-scale assessment. Operationalization in grammar assessment means identifying and measuring specific grammar skills in a clear and targeted way. Learning-oriented assessment of grammar may be achieved by means of a wide array of data gathering methods in classroom contexts. This also obviously includes conventional quizzes, tests containing selected response, limited production, and all sorts of extended production tasks as discussed earlier. We have here the positive evidence and the negative evidence on the grammatical abilities. So positive evidence, it reflects to information about the forms one can use in the target language to convey the intended meanings, while the negative reference information about the forms one cannot use in correct, meaningful, or appropriate manner. The scoring method in learning-oriented assessment can be specified to involve students. From a learning perspective, students need to develop the capacity for self-assessment so that they can learn to notice for themselves how their language compares with the target language norms. Learning to mark their own or their peers' work can in itself trigger further reanalysis and restructuring of interlanguage forms. So learning-oriented assessment of grammar can benefit from scoring methods that involve students' self and peer assessment. It helps them notice their languages different from target norms, prompting reanalysis and restructuring of interlanguage forms. So it's a hands-on approach that not only evaluates their grammar skills but also empowers them to take charge of their own learning. In learning-oriented assessment, self-assessment can vary considered depending on the proficiency level and age of the test takers. Most students at both high and low proficiency levels can be successfully trained to evaluate their own or their peers' work with reference to retained scales and set of guiding questions. In learning-oriented assessment, students can assess their own grammar skills, but the way they do it depends on their proficiency level and age. Students at lower or higher levels can learn to evaluate their own work or their peers' work by using rating scales and some guidance. So the students can compare their work to grammar norms and ask themselves relevant questions to help them improve their grammar skills. Peer assessment and learning-oriented assessment of grammar involves trained students evaluating each other's grammar performance using rating scales or guiding questions. This method not only helps students understand grammar strengths and weaknesses but also promotes collaboration and deeper language analysis. These are the methods of documenting the results of observation and learning-oriented assessment of grammar. So observation is a natural part of every classroom. It plays a significant role in learning-oriented assessment of grammar, especially with young learners. To effectively document the results of observation, there are several methods available such as using checklists, a scoring rubric, an anecdotal record, or some combination of the three. Second, we have the checklist. It is used to record the presence or absence of features and the construct under observation. Checklist provides a quick and easy way to keep track of students' grammar performance, while scoring rubrics offer a more detailed and structured approach to evaluate their abilities. Next, we have the anecdotal record. It is a written description of a behavior or interaction that is observed. So, on the other hand, it provides a personal and insightful account of a student's language use, making it a valuable tool in assessing their progress and identifying areas that need to improve. And anecdotal records can be used in many settings, including schools, childcare, and nursing. We have also here the reflection. It's another method of collecting information on students' grammatical ability at one point in time or over a period of time. It can also be used to assess students' feelings and attitudes toward learning grammar, as well as any other variables influencing grammar learning. Reflection and learning-oriented assessment of grammar helps teachers understand students' current performance, attitudes, and progress. So it also provides insights on factors hindering grammar learning and evaluates teaching methods. Next, we have the student journal. It is like a diary. This contains regular entries from a student on a topic of the student's choosing or interest in response to questions. It allows teachers to observe and provide feedback on their students' progress over time. Students can write regularly on topics of their choice or in response to questions, providing valuable data for evaluations. This method promotes self-expression and reflection while monitoring grammar skills. We have also here the learning log. A learning log is like a diary for grammar nerds. It is a place where students can write down their thoughts, struggles, and triumphs as they learn new grammar. Again, this can be open-ended or centered with questions about what students have learned, what remains unclear to them, what their attitudes and motivations are, and what are their struggles they have used to remember the new future. It is like their own personal soap opera, but instead of love triangles, it's about verb, tense, and prepositional phrases. Teachers love it too because it helps them understand which grammar points are confusing their students and how they're tackling them. Given that learning-oriented assessment involves the collection and interpretation of evidence about performance so that judgment can be made about further language development, learning-oriented assessment of grammar needs to be rooted not only in the theory of grammar testing or language proficiency, but also in the theory second language learning. So, my insight is that it is crucial to have a comprehensive understanding of language learning theories when conducting learning-oriented assessment of grammar, since this involves considering not only grammar testing and language proficiency, but also the broader context of how students learn and acquire new language skills. By having a social foundation in language acquisition theories, educators can design assessments that accurately measure students' grammar abilities and provide valuable insights into their language development. So, without this theoretical grounding, assessment risk lacking the necessary depth and accuracy needed to truly support and guide students' linguistic growth. Example of learning-oriented assessment of grammar. So, in an English class, the teacher says that many students are having difficulty with past tense verb forms. The teacher decides to design a learning-oriented assessment activity to help students identify and correct common errors. The assessment involves having students write a short paragraph about a personal experience that occurred in the past and then pair up with another students to check others' work. So together, they identify and correct any errors, and then the teacher provides feedback on their corrections. So this activity allows students to practice and improve their grammar skills through collaboration and feedback. In conclusion, learning-oriented assessment of grammatical ability are designed to support students' learning and improvement by assessing their knowledge and use of grammar in a way that informs instruction and provides feedback for ongoing development. So thank you for your attention. Thank you for listening, and I hope you have learned something today.